I have prepared a sermon for you folks today. This is what I love, always getting a chance to have my say. So that's basically what you've allowed me to do today. So I will begin. My friend Teresa gave a very inspiring sermon entitled, "It's All About the Love." And that's a line I really like. It's all about the love. It appeals to me. Love's really all that matters. If you live from a place of love, joy will follow, and I'm all about joy. I notice that the more I get, the better I feel. If you don't agree with me, just recall what you did to get out of the pit the last time you found yourself in it. You know what the pit is, don't you? That dark place that gives you no hope of anything in your life improving your spirits. And no matter how hard you try to claw your way out, there you were, stuck just below the top edge, or worse, sliding further down. Do you remember how you felt? Are you in the pit now? When we're in the pit, it's very hard to imagine our way out. It's dark and slimy in there. Completely the opposite of joy. But somehow you groped your way to the top edge, and here you are, zooming with Mosaic, possibly tired, but nevertheless functioning, depending on how long you've been out of the pit. Maybe you're here looking for the love of other human beings who have been where you were and are here with the love. Albert Schweitzer once said, "At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us." So a loving community is definitely helpful when you are in the pit or recovering from your ascent. How can we endure descents into the pit and yet agree with Teresa that it's all about the love? What's it? Well, life, of course, that living thing that's going on even while we're in the pit. We're down there with the pain, psychological and physical, and trying to scale the walls of that pit and slipping down the walls of that pit, or not. If we are extremely upward thinking, we wind up recovering from the pit. But we're all in the pit sometime or another. The pit is part of life, and if we're life-loving people, I think we have to accept that. When we're in the pit, we aren't being punished by someone or something. We may have done something that's put us there in that dark and hopeless place, but unless we're dead, we can figure out a way to undo some of the stuff that may have sent us there. That requires a huge amount of work on our part, but with help from loving others, we can do it. The harder a person works on recovery, it's possible to do more than survive. It's possible to thrive after the experience. Right now, I want to say this. If you've decided you are not quite a life-loving person, but you haven't tried to kill yourself yet, you need to contact the nearest suicide prevention hotline. Dial the number. Trained people take those calls, many of them survivors of the pit. And their listening and compassion are given freely out of love. There's that word again, love. It shows up in our darkest moments. And those folks may have some suggestions for how to access medical professionals to help you scale the slippery slopes of the pit. Avoiding the hotline, a friend of mine once consulted a psychologist about the enduring depression he was suffering. And the psychologist asked him, "Why don't you just kill yourself?" And my friend was so incensed at the question that he refused to go back to this person to discuss anything with that professional. He also did not kill himself. Maybe it was the shock effect of the question, or maybe he began to answer the question. I reflected on that question and on my friend's response, anger, and I've decided that's exactly what we all need to do. regularly answer that question for ourselves before we find ourselves so completely mired in the pit's muck? Why don't we just kill ourselves? I believe that every human being can feel love and joy in the remembering of life-affirming and sustaining events, people, and places. I believe we can do this remembering while in the pit. People who are survivors of some of the worst crimes humans can perpetrate on other humans say it's love that saved them. Remembering the love. It sparked the feeling of joy, and hope came next, and they survived. Was it work to stay alive? Oh yeah, sweaty work. I dare say it started in the pit, in the dark. If we're smart, we will consult trusted others for encouragement. But essentially, the work of survival is solitary business and done frequently, mostly during sleepless nights. I would never suggest the work of survival was finished when we emerge from the pit, having answered the question. That time, the pit never goes anywhere. Thrivers, however, continue to seek the love that Teresa reminds us is always there. More about thrivers in a minute. Just think of all the world's survivors, Holocaust survivors, survivors of war, political, gang, and drug, survivors of abuse by the ones charged to love and protect us, survivors of natural disasters, pandemics, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and fires, survivors of physiological events, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, chronic diseases, genetic mutations, survivors of injustice, survivors of evil, human trafficking, rape, torture, attempted murder, all survivors of the pit. Some of those folks are also thrivers. They emerged from the muck and somehow found joy, enough joy to inspire them to work for the welfare of others. I can think of some big-time thrivers. For example, Nelson Mandela, John McCain, Viktor Frankl, Martin Luther King Jr. You can probably think of some in your personal circle of friends and family that fit the definition of a thriver. Right now, I am thinking of the families whose loved ones have died at the hands or knees of injustice, but who have somehow found the strength to carry on their lives with passion in service of others who have suffered similarly. If you are in the pit because your massage was canceled, or you are suffering from a hangnail, or you can't get ahead enough to afford a glitzier house, clothing, toys, or fancy trips, I suggest you are in need of gaining some perspective. However, have you ever been in any of those aforementioned truly devastating and life-challenging situations during which time you suffered greatly in the pit? No, of course you have. You are human. Have you ever had a frightening medical or event or diagnosis? Did it lead to painful and or disappointing treatment? Did you lose a loved one, maybe, or even especially by surprise? Are you the caregiver for a debilitated loved one whose needs you try to anticipate as well as meet, even as doing that exhausts you? Did you, do you feel yourself sliding down the slippery slope of the pit? How did you survive? Well, you're here. If you're here, you're not mired in the pit right now, this minute. Oh my, if you are still breathing, you are a survivor. Did you remember the love, or was it something else? Revenge? Love of thoughts of revenge might pull you out of the pit, but revenge won't keep you going in an upward and positive trajectory once you're on terra firma. I'm definitely a proponent of upward and positive trajectories. I've survived a number of pits in my 74 years, and I'm sure there will be more. Upward and faith-filled is the only way to go for me, and I want to do more than survive. I want to thrive, and I suspect you all do too. So how to do that? I have some thoughts. First, on a daily basis, we need to recognize the love we give and the love we receive. We need to appreciate that love on a daily basis. We remember what we are grateful for. We must do everything we can to remember how good it feels when we are grateful. We never know when disasters will happen, and we may find ourselves on a slippery slope with no warning whatsoever, and we will need to remember that love. How will we do that? Well, we will answer some more questions. Try these. What lifts you up? What are you grateful for? What gives you the oomph to get out of bed after a bad, maybe a painful night's sleep? What makes you come alive during the course of your days? What or whom do you love? I suggest the longer and more specific the list, the better, because you got to remember, the pit never goes away. If it's all about the love, do memories of any kind of love count to save your hide when you're trying to climb out of the pit? And I say yes. Every loving memory counts, whether it's love for your friends and family, philia, love for your romantic beloved, eros, or love for all of humankind, agape. Love is love, really, no matter how you carve it up. Joy will follow, and hope will grow. In my opinion, agape deserves some extra consideration in the love discussion. Agape has been defined as the kind of love the divine has for humankind. All-encompassing, active, sacrificial, expecting nothing in return. That kind of love. Oh, you say you're spiritual but not religious, so you don't have a word in your lexicon for the divine? Agape is out of the picture. But I say, of course you have a word for the divine. Your word may be justice or compassion or kindness or generosity or creativity or hospitality or peace or inclusiveness or unity or truth. I could go on, but I'll bet you get my drift. If you still squirm when you whisper, it's all about the love, as Teresa suggests we should whisper every single day, as many times as we can, it might be helpful to use your own personally chosen word for the divine. For me, love, period, does the job just fine. For many, the word God will work too. After all, though, what is it but love that motivates genuine compassion, kindness, generosity, creativity, justice, and all the rest? Genuine is an important word here. No kickbacks for being generous or just. No expectations of compassion just because we happen to demonstrate that to someone somewhere. Genuine, true with no strings attached. Now, if we are inclined to cultivate in our own hearts this kind of love, agape, we'd better be willing to work at it. We are human, not superhuman. We will sweat. Love, no matter what kind of love we're dealing with, requires action, work, sweat. We show love. We don't just talk about it. And while I think cultivating agape in our own hearts is the supreme endeavor, I think it takes a lifetime of work. Probably it's best to practice going for it a little bit at a time. I think it's best to pay attention to what you're doing, how that work feels. For example, maybe you volunteered to sit with patients in hospice, to be a non-anxious presence in their lives so their caregivers can get a breather. You trained to do this volunteer job. They are total strangers to you. You dive into your work, but you give yourself time to feel your experiences with the various patients and their families. Not all of them were pleasant to be around, small wonder, but you opened yourself to them. You felt empathy even for the difficult ones. Over time, as you did your work, you noticed that your hospice experiences gave you joy, a deep joy. Deep joy is the kind of compensation a person gets from love, but especially from agape. And who here does not want to feel deep joy? For me, that's what life's all about, the joy. The world needs an overabundance of agape right now, when it really seems like almost everyone in the world is in the pit. Oh, the pit, yes. As we recall the many times we've been in it, can we likewise remember what will boost us out of it? Did you make your list of loving memories? Can we extricate ourselves from our own pain long enough to recall the different ways we can sweat as we work toward agape? Love for everyone, even those we don't know, even those whose values are, in some cases, diametrically opposed to our own. Can we embrace the mean, the cruel, the selfish, the obnoxious, the weird, the ignorant, the supercilious? I'd say we better embrace those folks, because if we're honest, we know we've been all that at some time, somewhere. Wow, that's going to take some real sweat. Can we recall the joy we have felt in our baby step attempts to cultivate agape? Are we thankful that we have each other for help in gaining perspective? Do you feel deep joy in the company of other lovers? Is survival enough for you, or do you want to thrive? I am full of questions today, but that's what Unitarian Universalism is all about, isn't it? Asking important questions and answering them for ourselves. Our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, right? And learning how to love better in the company of other lovers, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We have all been in the pit. We have survived the experiences. We'll be on the edge of the pit again, but we don't have to descend completely to the bottom. We are lovers. We can work on agape and become thrivers. And thrivers are imbued with joy. Thrivers are, in my opinion, the ones most likely to avoid a rapid and merciless plunge to the bottom of the pit. After all, they're too busy working for the growth of love in our world and sweating too much for others' well-being to concentrate exclusively on themselves. They are grateful people. Their reward is deep joy. They like how that feels. They're going for more. Are you? Thank you for letting me have my say. Please enjoy fellowship time at the conclusion of the service.